Hello everyone, I'm day weather meteorologist Don Day with your Public Lands Council weekly weather update for this June 15th, 2024, brought to you by Ag Risk Advisors and WSR Insurance Services Incorporated. What we're going to see across the United States over the next 7 days is a lot of extreme. There's going to be one extreme on one end of the country, an extreme on the other end, and in between, well, you get a little bit of both. What we're going to see is a very hot dome of high pressure build over the eastern areas of the U.S. It's going to be making headlines. By the middle to the end of next week, extremely hot weather for Philadelphia, Washington, D.C., Boston, up through New England, into parts of the eastern Great Lakes region. It is going to be hot, hot, hot. But in the west, it is going to be the opposite. It's going to be much cooler. An interesting situation where a deep storm coming in out of Western Canada will cool off the western half of the U.S., but that's going to push the heat out of the deserts and out of the Gulf right into the eastern and northeastern United States. Now, rain chances will be highest in the far northern areas. The northern plains, the Dakotas, Minnesota, parts of the northwest Corn Belt, looks like parts of Montana, maybe a little bit in the Pacific Northwest. You're going to have the best chances of the most consistent rainfall chances. Now, there's also going to be, maybe not so much over the next week, but maybe the week after this, there'll be some better chances for thunderstorms in the desert Southwest and Southern Rockies. We still have some very persistent dryness over some areas of the high plains. There are pockets of western Nebraska, pockets of Wyoming, pockets of Colorado, and some areas west of the Continental Divide that just have not done well with the spring moisture. It's not everywhere, but there are islands of dryness that will be a concern going forward. Taking a look at the last week, over the last week we did see some nice and needed rains over parts of Texas and New Mexico, down in the southwest Texas here. That was good to see. More needed rain for many areas of Kansas and eastern areas of Colorado. That did well, but notice lighter amounts in the northern and central Rockies up here to the north. Not much in the eastern side of the Dakotas. A little bit drier up there, but this area, as you'll see in a moment, up here is about ready to get wet again. Lots of dryness in the Pacific Southwest, the Southwest United States, as the Pacific Coast areas, California, the desert Southwest of New Mexico, just very little going on. Then the very, very heavy rains that some of you may have heard on the news down in the Florida area. The Gulf Coast region is about ready to get very wet here in the week ahead. Now, over the last week, the heat has been centered in the west. Bullseye right on Nevada there and parts of Northern California. Relative to average, this is where the warmth has been. But look at Canada and the eastern United States. What's going to happen is we're going to see a reversal. This heat will shift up here. This cold will shift over here. Going to get things rearranged a little bit. The latest drought monitor shows that finger of dryness we just talked about for parts of Colorado, western Nebraska, eastern Wyoming, central areas of South Dakota getting a little bit drier. We did see some drought improvement with those rains right here, but those areas persistently dry. Over the last 2 weeks, the green areas show where drought conditions have shown improvement. So this area right here has definitely shown some improvement. I think there's more to come. The yellow is where dryness has started to pick up. And you can see these areas of dryness right here. The gray shows where there's been no drought status change in the last 14 days. Now let's take a look at what's coming. We talked about a reversal, and here it is. Over the next 7 days, from this weekend till next weekend, you can see the coolness invading the west. Canada's western and central areas, the Pacific Northwest and Northern Plains and Northern Rockies. This is all 7 days added together. So this is certainly a cooling trend in the west, but look at the heat in the central and the east. The heat is really going to be extreme, especially in this area by the middle to the end of next week. It's going to be very, very warm in those areas. It's going to really cool off in the west. In fact, temperatures could be 10, 20 degrees below average in some areas. So even into the Great Basin, the areas that have been very hot, places like Las Vegas, Salt Lake City, you're going to cool off. Casper, Billings, up to Fargo, Bismarck. You're going to cool off into western areas of the high plains, I think down to here as well. Now, let's take a look at what the precipitation looks like. We talked about the northern areas. Montana, the Dakotas, the northern plains could do very well in this area right here. However, we still have a tendency to not be as wet here where they really, really need it. Notice the Gulf of Mexico. Notice that along the coast, we could see some heavy rain, even into Big Bend country of Texas and back further into Mexico. This is because a tropical wave, this might be a named tropical storm by sometime next week. This is going to move westward towards Mexico. Then that moisture could be drawn next week, the week after this one, northward into the desert southwest, bringing increasing rain and thunderstorm chances into those areas. So that'll be something with next week's update we'll watch, because that could mean good news for the Four Corners area, the western slope, this area of the west that could really use some rain. This is what that 7-day temperature pattern looks like: the cool in the west, the heat in the east. Look at this. It will be cold enough that, yeah, that is snow. It could snow in the highest reaches of Yellowstone National Park, the Montana, Idaho mountains, and into the Rockies of Canada with that cooler air that's coming in early next week. So some mid-June snow is a possibility. Have yourself with a good week ahead. Be ready for the changing weather across the U.S. with the cooler weather in the west and the heat in the east. We'll see you next week.